at Dwayne 6. Blah, 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 blah. What the hell is going on with Nylander? Fans are losing patience. Some who, abide by the analytics Bible think that this is the way it should be. That William Nylander is the guy who needs to be catered to because he is the almighty, and it's Mitch Marner who's going to take the hit down the line because Mitch Marner's not as good. I'm being facetious here, Mike, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, those people who have that belief are wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that Nylander does not deserve to be signed. He does, but I think his side needs to come down a little bit. Otherwise, I read a piece from Chris Johnston this morning, and he makes some really valid points that the Leafs, they really like William Nylander. They really want to keep him in the fold, but it's all based on what he expects to be paid. And there's even a thought that if he decides that he's going to go past December 1st and they still own his rights, it still keeps everything in place in terms of them holding on to him for at least 4 more years, but that they wouldn't trade him unless they get good value for him. And I think that's true. I don't think if they get lowballed by teams, then they may not trade Nylander, but I'm convinced based on the number of teams that supposedly will be interested in him, and especially Carolina, who's just been a constant presence in terms of scouting at Scotiabank, and even there was a scout there yesterday in Pittsburgh. I mean, I think eventually it's either going to come down to Nylander signing the deal that the Leafs want or close to it, or him being traded. I don't see him not sitting out and going and playing in the KHL or Sweden for a year.
Do you believe this right now is all business? No matter how this ends, it's all business. Or do you feel like if the Nylander camp caves, 29 is going to end up returning to Toronto as Mr. Pouty Face?
I think it's mostly business. I don't think this is a personal thing. I think they want, he wants to play in Toronto. I think they want to keep him in Toronto, but his agent is somebody who has players that have stayed away from teams when they're restricted free agents. So that's a tactic. And we know the history of his dad in the NHL. So I think this is, their belief is they want to get as much for William as possible. And I understand that, but based on the reality and based on contracts that have been signed, like Yanni Gourde in the last few days, who had a better offensive year than Nylander did last year, but it was only 1 year as opposed to 2, and he got a little over $5 million. I mean, that's the reality. He's not going to get $8 million from anybody.
No question. Cam, he's a big fan of yours, at Cam Watts 25. Can you ask Mike what it would take to swap Hamilton for Willie?
I don't think Carolina's trading Dougie Hamilton. He's a top line or top pairing right shot defenseman, and they gave up a lot to get him. I think if there's a Carolina deal involving a defenseman, it's going to be a Brett Pesce, who's 23 years old, who's under contract for 5 more years after this year at a little over $4 million. He's not a exciting offensive defenseman,
and they don't need that. The Leafs don't need any more exciting offensive defensemen. They don't need any more.
Right. I mean, right. And the thing is that and I think Pesce would be actually a pretty good matchup with Morgan Rielly on a top pairing. The cost certainty is a positive, and I think the deal would probably be larger. There's no reason for Carolina to have been scouting the Leafs for all the last few weeks if they were talking about just Nylander. Nylander is not playing, so they know that they're looking at other players, and it's probably, if a deal does come down, it's probably a 3-for-2 or a 2-for-2 or something like that.
Statistically, Michael, do you think the Leafs can bring back what they would conceivably give away in William Nylander? Statistically, metrically, asset-wise, is it possible for the Leafs to recoup what they would be transferring out of town, or do you feel like no matter what the Leafs bring back, pound for pound, they'd be giving away more than they'd be getting?
No, I don't think Kyle Dubas is going to make a deal that isn't asset-wise an even deal, at least for Nylander. I mean, if he perceives that he's not getting enough, then it would be painful to have him play in the KHL or Sweden, but better that, and they retain his rights than to make a trade like Hall for Larson, where you regret it immediately. I think that they know the talent that William Nylander is. They expect to get a good return for him if they decide to trade him, and if they don't get the return that they want, then they won't trade him. But I think if you get Pesce and another forward for William Nylander, I think that that's a deal that would benefit the Leafs because it improves their defense, and they would get somebody back that would play probably in their top nine. But we'll
Intriguing
see.
times, Michael. If William Nylander comes back and he's happy to have returned to Toronto, and the Leafs as players embrace him, and he gives this team another jolt of offensive electricity, I'm excited. If they trade him off and bring something back that they require now, I'm just as excited.